Allow me to introduce myself.
I am the last sane sports fan.
I am a genius by trade.
I just knew too much. Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Possibly.
Hello everyone and welcome once again to The View from the Midwest. We haven't had any real big topics to talk about lately. The baseball season kind of keeps churning along. Teams win, teams lose. I mean, when you're playing every day, it's kind of difficult to come up with specific topics to talk about when it comes to that. So basically, we've kind of just got more to do with the Rams situation going on with the stadium and who's going to go where, what the latest kind of information is. Again, the more stories that I read and the more information or lack of information that gets put out there, the more I personally feel the need to go back to what Mr. Viverito said at this referees clinic that I went to, that he was told by Dave Peacock. Don't get on the roller coaster. Read all the stuff that you want, take out of it what you will, but don't get on the roller coaster, because ultimately there's too many highs, too many lows, and you're just going to end up hurting yourself, for lack of a better term. But the latest that's going on with the stadium situation here in the Midwest, obviously, is a little bit of a hurdle was cleared in that Governor Nixon of Missouri was removed from the lawsuit as it was filed in the county where the state capital is, obviously. The judge ruled that there was no need for it to be filed in that county, that the case should be heard in St. Louis. The legislators who filed the lawsuit are saying, well, that's a technicality and we'll probably be able to file it again in the same county and re-include the governor. It's all a waste of time, and it's just a really big waste of time and dollars. And I find it hilarious that the one of the main congressmen, Schaaf, who's a senator from St. Joseph, Missouri, is sitting there saying that he will take this as far as it needs to go to make sure that this never gets into the budget, and if he ever sees any kind of stadium money on the budget, he'll filibuster and blah, blah, blah. But yet he's willing to waste taxpayer dollars to take this to all sorts of different courts. And also, this is just a bunch of political BS, because, like, I'm not an old person by any stretch of the imagination. I'm only in my 30s, but I've become very disenfranchised and very disingenuous towards many politicians, because I can see right through their BS a lot of times. The fact that this is a senator from St. Joseph, which is all the way across the state, is no small matter of fact, in my opinion, because I can guarantee if this had to do with Arrowhead or keeping the Chiefs in Kansas City, if that was the problem, then this guy, I don't think, would be quite as boisterous forming these lawsuits and trying to keep money away from any kind of stadium proposal in St. Louis. We've had this happen before. I don't remember every specific instance in clear and crystal detail, but I know for a fact that when stadium renovations were made to Arrowhead and the whole Kauffman complex, there were politicians from St. Louis and around this area that were saying, well, why should we have to pay for something across the state? And now all of a sudden it's becoming a tit-for-tat kind of thing, where somebody from out west is saying, well, the state shouldn't have to pay for St. Louis. They have a stadium and they don't need two stadiums. And all of a sudden you get in this kind of turf war, for lack of a better word, but where it's east versus west, and it's just ultimately a big waste of time. Stop putting the brakes on these kind of projects. because it benefits the state. I'm not one of those people who is silly enough to believe that having a stadium is really going to just boost the economy. I know that it's basically money for the owners and it goes in their pockets, and that's where a lot of it stays. But in terms of helping out the economy, it helps out restaurants, it helps out bars, it helps out people with jobs who go and spend that money across the state. There are people who travel from all across the state to come to Rams games. Vice versa, there are people who come from St. Louis and the surrounding areas that go to Chiefs games. It benefits the state of Missouri in an overall sense. It may not be the grand scheme, you may not see a ton of dollars from it, but if there's nothing available there, then that's dollars lost. And the idea that this person just wants to politic and try to position himself and tell his constituents, you see, I'm trying to keep your tax dollars here on the west side of the state, in St. Joseph, Missouri. We don't need to be sending our money across the state to St. Louis. Well, I remember when the politicians over on this side of the state did the same thing to Kansas City, and ultimately it ended up going through, and Arrowhead got its necessary upgrades, and Kauffman Complex got its necessary upgrades, and it's all just a big bunch of BS, and I'm sick of it. I'm sick of politicians sticking their nose in every single little opportunity just based on the idea that they might get a couple more votes come the next election, because that's all that this is about. This guy doesn't honestly care about education or infrastructure or anything like that, because if he did, he would be coming up with plans to raise new funds and get things going in his area, not worrying about what money might be spent towards a stadium in St. Louis, because quite honestly, it's not really going to affect anybody over there. I understand that some of these bonds and these tax credits and taxes, for lack of a better word, will be across the state. But I mean, these kind of things are so minuscule that your average person doesn't even know that they're being taken out. And all this is again just politicking and raising the big gorilla up in the air, saying, well, taxes, 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 because you throw that out at the foolish people who don't know any better, and they're like, yeah, you're right, I don't want to pay any more taxes, especially for something way over there. It's all a waste of time, people. Calm down, drop these lawsuits, because you're wasting as much money that you could be saving the taxpayers on lawsuits that you're claiming that you're going to save them if they don't pay anything towards a stadium anywhere in the state. Sticking with the Rams, something that's really kind of bugged me every time this gets brought up on national media, especially, pardon the interruption, listen, people love or hate that show. I particularly love it, especially when the main two hosts are on there. When they start getting their substitutes in there, not so much. But when it's Wilbon and Kornheiser, I love the show. I don't always agree with them. I don't always agree with their choices in what they want to show, because they don't like soccer at all, even though that's a real sport. But they'll spend all the time in the world on tennis and horse racing. It's like, get a life. You want to tell me that soccer's not important? Nobody cares about horse racing, but I could do an entire show on that. The strange thing that they keep coming up with is both of them seem to think, simply because Stan Kroenke wants to go to LA and is willing to put his own money in an Inglewood Stadium, that the Rams are going, and the other two teams from California will probably move as well. I'm sorry, LA is a huge market, but there is no way in any kind of sane thinking that any city in this country or any city in the world needs 3 NFL teams. I understand that in soccer there are cities that have multiple teams. London's got 4 soccer teams, but that's not the same thing. The NFL is so huge. You're trying to pack in 70, 80,000 people in a stadium nowadays with these palaces that are being built. There is no way, regardless of population, that a city will support 3 different teams. There is no way that all 3 teams will be good. There is no way they will pack the stadium for all 3, regardless of if they have 2 stadiums or not. it's just not workable. That's not the way that people work. People want to gravitate towards winners. If you have one winning team and two losing teams, or potentially three losing teams, given the recent history of all three franchises that are rumored to be moving to LA right now, LA has proven that if you're not winning, they don't care. There are passionate fans out there. There are a lot of people, I've been in communication with a couple who want the Rams back and think they should have never left. That's fine. That's your opinion. You're a Rams fan, or you just grew up in that situation and feel for the people who are Rams fans. I completely understand that and wanting the team back in that situation. But the idea that there could be three teams in LA is just utterly ridiculous. You can throw all the population numbers that you want at me, and I still do not believe that there is enough of an actual fan base that will turn up and pay money every single week for 16 weeks out of an NFL season to make that a really viable situation. Springboarding off of that, and this is kind of just a bit of a personal topic that I want to bring up. Everybody, especially the guys on PTI again, they want to kind of cite the history. Well, the Rams belong in LA. They have so much history there. They started there. Well, no, they didn't. They started in Cleveland. Cleveland seems to be kind of a city that everybody wants out of. They started back in Cleveland way back in the day. So if we want to just return everybody to their original sites, let's put them back in Cleveland. Let's take the Lakers away from LA. Let's put them back in Minneapolis. Not everything needs to be where it was originally intended, because then the Cardinals would not be in St. Louis. The football Cardinals, that is. They would be in Chicago. Chicago would actually be somewhere in Indiana, because they started over there. It was just over alongside the border. I mean, if you really want to return everybody to where they originally started, you're going to have a cluster, because a lot of these teams didn't necessarily start where most people think they did. There was a long history of the Rams in LA. They have the most history in that city. I realize that. But they aren't necessarily originally from Los Angeles. So it's just something to think about when we kind of try to say, well, they belong in this certain area. It's like nobody necessarily belongs anywhere, because very few teams actually started where they are currently playing. Just something to think about. That is The View from the Midwest. What are your views on today's topics? Comment, rate, and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up on Facebook and YouTube, and we'll keep the conversation going. But until the next time, I'll see you then.